Good day to you. Today we're going to take a look at how things in IT progress as far as the information. When you really look at what's happening in the world, we're making computers, we're having computers do more and more and more. But there's always something else beyond that to do. And so you're you're well away from a time where IT people are never needed or programmers are never needed. Those will, as far as I can see, always be needed because we build and build and build. So we build on the past into the future. And that's not any different than what we do actually physically in our society, where we had rudimentary roads, then we pave those into rudimentary roads, and then we make them highways, and then we make them freeways. And right, we're building on what we've done in the past and making things better and easier as we get along. And that continues to happen. And that progress happens within certain technologies, within specific technologies. I shouldn't say certain, within specific technologies. Anything that you look at, you can take and say, oh, that was really hard at one point, and now it's easy. For instance, virtualization's been around a long time. We talk about virtualization because it's so important in several classes. So I'm not going to give you a big discourse on it here. But virtualization, I teach basically a server virtualization class, CMP 255, in which we go through five chapters of information for the whole semester, and all the rest is hands-on. All the rest is lab work. All the rest is designed to be, for you, kind of a real world experience. I basically will show you some stuff, talk about some things, you go through the work, and then it's like, sit down and do it. See you later, right? Like your boss would, right? We need to get this going. You're the new expert on it. You figure it out and do it. And so you sit down and you spend days figuring out how to do that. And then you go, okay, there it is. Or you find trainings, or you go online and right. In the future, right, for you, in your future, you're going to be looking at, I am going to be the person that learns what they need me to learn and does what they need me to do. And as you go through that process, as I've said, you get to kind of choose your path, right? You get into something you don't like, then you leave that and you go into something else. I have a student, he did really well. It took him probably 4 years to get through the information. And the reason why is because he was a full-time worker getting paid well doing what he was doing. And he didn't want to do that anymore. So he came into computer. He got hired by an organization, got a really awesome opportunity. He was their network person and tying different remote sites together. He progressed through that really rapidly, and now he's into the programming side of it. Now, because of what they do with such intensive networking through satellite systems and so on, that networking was foundational for him being able to do the programming, because all the programming is around that. And that programming within that organization is trying to make something that was once difficult easy to do. And that's the progression that continues to happen over and over again. So I've got, an example here on the screen. Let me make sure that this is going to be showing you, because even though it says it's sharing the screen, I doubt it is. So, all right, so things get harder, things get easier. The progression of IT work. So this is DOS back in the day. This is a version 1.0, which I did not work with. I was too young to work with that. And information was difficult to get. And of course, the computer systems were expensive. So I wouldn't even have an opportunity to use something like this. But once I got into college around 87, I started working with DOS pretty heavily, and I gravitated towards it and I loved it. And that's probably because my prior experience on Commodore computers were command line. It was typing stuff in and a little more rudimentary than what DOS was. And so I had a good start. Here's the thing. I want to show you a list of DOS commands. This is very hard to deal with, this command line interface. And in the operating systems class, I force you to do it there. I force you to do it in 118, CIS 180 in that course as well, because I want you to learn to deal with this, because if you are getting into networking, if you're getting into servers, if you're getting into security, any one of those areas, you'll be working in a command line. You won't be working with DOS and its rudimentary, terrible system, but you will have to deal with, how do I see this? This is what we're used to seeing now, right? A graphical user interface. This is Linux Mint running Cinnamon. I like Linux Mint quite a bit. I think it's organized quite well. But anyway, that's a different thing. This I could set a 10-year-old down in front of and say, hey, can you, type a document on here and copy some information off the internet? And without any other instruction, basically any 10-year-old will be able to go out and do that. It's easier to do. This operating system does way more than this DOS system does. But this was a lot harder to learn than the new system. So to give you an example, let's jump over here. We'll get to our Edlin example in a minute. I got that pulled up. Just let me get these controls out of the way that you can't see, but I can see. All right, so here we are in, I love the internet. The internet when we first started was really not that easy, but this is, the internet is another example of progression of technology and making it easier and more powerful. Anyway, MS-DOS 3.3 reference guide. I ought to save this because I use that. I used Microsoft MS-DOS 3.3. Anyway, I want you to see the list of commands here. So when we say list of commands, what I'm talking about is this is what you can do with the system. This is all you can do with the system. Now, I'm not saying you can't run a program on it or use some type of spreadsheet or whatever. I'm talking about, I need to manage my files. I need this to start up this way. I need the memory to do this, that kind of thing. So just take a look here at how many commands there are. That's it. We basically have 2 full pages of commands. And if you learned those commands, you knew everything. You knew everything about the system. Now, being able to type them in, when to type them in, which ones have to happen first, blah, 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 blah. That was a difficult proposition. But once you learned that, it was easy. So in other words, what I'm saying is when I came to school and I had to learn, okay, this is what we're doing with operating systems, piece of cake for me, right? My mind absorbed it anyway. I basically learned the 50 commands, where they're used, how it's formatted, which ones have to happen first before the other ones. And I'm an expert. That's not what you're going to do if you want to learn about Windows 10, right? It's not the same thing, because we built on this, got rid of a lot of the tasks that you don't need to worry about, have the computer do those, and now we're having you move on. To give you another example of how bad this was, I used to use a product called Edlin, which was called, basically that is termed edit line. Edlin is a line editor, meaning one line at a time. So editors these days, right, when we're talking about editors, we're talking about open up Google Docs, open up Notepad, open up Word. Those are all text editors, and they're very easy. You just start typing. If you want to read a file, a configuration file, you just pull it up. There it is on the screen. You see the whole thing. You go to the line you want to edit, you change it, you delete it, you do whatever you want to do, and then you save the file. That's not what we could do then. So just to show you a little bit, you had to know some pretty cryptic commands. And basically, you didn't type the command, you typed a letter, right? So when we see I that inserts, interesting, they're not putting L on there. L is to list. So basically what you're typing, this little asterisk is where you would type it. And you would type in 1,6 L, meaning what I want to do is list everything from the first line through the 6th line. Yeah, that's what you did. Now that seems like, why isn't it L 1,6? And why is there no space here? did it work without a space? No, you had to have no space. It was crazy. And so if you wanted to edit something, you would have, this is a 6i, so that's insert, right? Insert. So if I want to edit something, then I'm going to, oh, E saves and quits. Why does E save and quit? Q quits without saving, but E saves and quits? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you learned and you memorized because you could not edit anything without doing that. Now, again, when I'm talking about editing, let me give you an example of that. So the computer starts up, there's about 10 things you want the computer to do to make it easier for the person that you're setting this up for. So maybe you want it to pull up a menu, and because of some program they use, they want a certain amount of memory available, and there's a command for that. And so, and you could just say, hey, every time the computer boots, after it's done, type these 5 things. And you could have it on a piece of paper and they could type each one of them. But, you know, users don't always do that. So instead, let's just make it automatic for them. We'll put in what's known as a batch file. That's called scripting. So these days they use special scripting files. And you type in the command the way it's supposed to be. And then every single time the computer starts, it calls the batch file. And the batch file runs those 5 commands. So if I want to edit that batch file, then I would then list out what I'm seeing. Then I would say, okay, line 5 is what I need to edit. Let's go in, you know, list my 5. And let's go ahead and insert this. And just, yeah, if you didn't know these letters by heart, then you couldn't edit anything in DOS because there was no editor in it until about DOS 5.0, maybe 4.0, I can't remember. And then when that came out, right, that was a major thing. So that's difficult. That's really, really difficult. To do some simple task, that's really super difficult. And of course, now we don't have to do that in the operating systems we have. It's so much easier. So you're looking at this progress, and I'm giving you some old example that I experienced, but I could give you about 25, 30 more off of different technologies that were really hard and then became much easier. Virtualization is one of those. For instance, I teach a CMP 255 class. And that CMP 255 class is organized basically, there's 5 chapters you go through to really understand what you're going to be doing. We cover virtualization in 113, we cover it in 118, we cover it networking, right? Virtualization has become a big thing. And so anyway, in this class, you cover 5 chapters for the whole semester. And then I basically, we set up the virtual server on a bare bones system, and they call it bare metal hypervisor. And then boom, I say, do these things. And really the design is to give you a taste of what it's like in IT, that instead of this very structured, here's what you learn, now do the lab, here's what you learn, now do the lab. That's not what happens in reality. In reality, they give you a big task and then they just leave it to you to get it done. And if you do well at that, then you get more tasks. And that's why in IT, you can kind of mold and shape, because you might do something certain and go, wow, this is really cool. Virtualization is cool. I want to do that. And you can learn more about that, right? That's one of the advantages. Now, the disadvantage is that there's always something new to learn. And so I've already given that little, at least I think you've watched that video, of this concept of if you have an inquisitive mind, you're set for IT. If you have a mind that gets a little agitated when everything's just staying the same, then you're really good for IT. And most people, again, that go into IT don't know, but that's the way their mind is. They get a little unsettled and they're like, I want to learn something new. And that's why they gravitate to what's new in Windows, or what is there something more in this game, and blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on. So the progression is this. There's not much to know, but doing anything was difficult. And then we progress upward to a lot to know, but doing anything is much easier. And so much of what you're learning here at Eastern Arizona College, right, cramming in all this information, is this. There is a lot to know, and that is actually the challenge in your education. Is there's so much to know. Where in mine, it was like there's a lot less to know, but you better be really excellent at it because otherwise you can't do anything. Again, virtualization is a perfect example. There's no way I would have taught the virtualization in CMP 255 server class, say 15 years ago. Just no way. You would have had to go through a ton of information. And then it would have been so difficult for you to actually get it done that most people would come out of that class going, what the heck did I do? And what did I learn? I don't know. But it got to a point where virtualization became easy enough to show you the basic intermediate stuff that would really help you when you move on. As a matter of fact, that CMP 255, when I started that course, I had a lot of people going, what the heck are you doing? You teaching server virtualization? Because that is this big dog stuff that you do on the server side of things. And it's like, yeah, but now it's so easy to teach them the basic to intermediate stuff that why can't a student just go in and learn that? It's this process, and I've seen this over and over again. Server virtualization and implementing it back, say, in 2000, probably 2000 to 2007. That was not an easy thing to do, but now it's much easier to do. It's much easier, although the information around it that you need to know is more, right? Because it's grown, it's become bigger. So to kind of sum it up, there's always something new to learn. You're never going to be out of a job, because what'll happen is you'll learn what you learn here, which will be the foundation of doing whatever it is that you start doing. And usually that doing, when you first start, is kind of general. And then you'll start to focus into some area that really appeals to you, like servers or networking, security. There's tons and tons. I'm only mentioning, the big ones. You'll start to focus on that, and then all of a sudden the stuff that you had to know when you first started is not as important as now updating your information on what you need to know. The good thing is that as there's always something to learn, that is not a huge, massive amount of information. That's just a smaller subset that you're building on top of. As a matter of fact, if you ever get to the point in your career where you're like, yeah, that's pretty good, nothing really that challenges me, or, I pretty much know it all, you're probably pretty close to being fired. And that's because there's something that you're not updating. There's something that you're not doing, because technology continues to progress, right? Eventually, we're going to get to the point where in networking, we don't need to know what those IP addresses are. The computer's all taking care of it, but you'll be managing something else, right? So I just want to point that out, that in IT work, because information continues to expand and build on the last stuff, the progression of IT is that something that you get into may be hard initially, and then it becomes easier, and that continues, and that continues. And our goal here, or especially my goal here at EAC, is to really make sure that you've got that solid base so you can build whatever you need to on top of that. What I need, again, from you is the dedication to do that, the dedication to study time, to actually study and get the information in your head so you can be successful as you move forward.